Hi and a huge welcome to Steve's Kitchen. Today I'm taking this brown ale. It's a pig and whistle brown ale that I got from the Bullant brewery on my recent trip. Now you may have seen the video where I was going up the coast of Australia. This is one of the beers I brought back with me. And I'm going to take this now and turn this into a steak and ale pudding with a traditional suet pastry. So let's get on, I'll show you how. Now the basis of our ingredients are fairly simple. We've got about 14 ounces, 400 grams of stewing steak. I've got some button mushrooms, about 150 grams, that's about 5 ounces. Of course our ale, I've got a carrot and a brown onion. And we will be using some seasoning and flour, of course. I'll show you that as we go along. Right, firstly I've got a handful of plain flour in here, all-purpose flour. I'm adding about a teaspoon of salt and half a teaspoon of ground black pepper. And I've got my beef, my cubes, and I just want to lightly dust those in the flour. So we're just going to pop them into the flour here, give them a dusting over. So I've heated some oil in a shallow pan and I'm just going to take my beef now and I really just want to seal the beef and brown it all over. So we're looking to get our beef lovely and brown like that, and once it's browned all over, just set it aside. Now into the same pan, we're going to put our sliced brown onions, and we want to keep all those flavours from the cooked meat in there as well. We're also taking that carrot, which I finely diced, and we just want to sweat those onions down until they're translucent. Now when your onions are translucent like that, we're going to add our mushrooms, which I've just quartered, and we're just going to cook them for another minute or so, just to let the mushrooms cook through a tiny amount. And then add the onion, carrot and mushroom in with the beef. We're just going to set that aside to cool down. So here's a quick quiz. Any guesses what this is? I'll give you a quick clue. Yeah, if we had a twist off, we'd be using that, but if we're not, and we haven't in this case, we're just going to use the tail there to open our brown ale. So we just need a cup of that brown ale now in the pan, just to deglaze all the flavour out of that pan. I don't want to lose any of the flavour of the onions or the beef. And then we just add the brown ale in there and allow that to completely cool while we make the pastry. In a mixing bowl, I'm putting 8 ounces, 250 grams of self-raising flour. Now, self-raising flour, for those of you who don't know, is just really all-purpose flour with a rising agent in the way of baking powder in there. So you can look it up on the internet, or maybe I'll put a recipe up on my channel. And 125 grams, 4 ounces of suet. Suet, guys, is really essential for this recipe. So if you need to know what it is, if you don't know, it is a beef fat that's been grated. Now you can talk to your butchers about it. They can normally supply it to you. It should be no problem. Now because this pastry doesn't have a lot of flavour, I like to add about half a teaspoon of English mustard powder and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. And then I've got 2/3 of a cup of water. I'm not going to put it all in at once, but most of it's going to go in there. Keep a little bit back. And we're just going to use a fork then to bring this pastry together. And after a few seconds, you can draw the fork out of there and start to pull it together with your hands. If it's a little bit too dry, we can start to add a little extra of our water. Probably going to use all of this actually. So after a minute or so of just pulling that together, you can see that the dough is still crumbly, but it's starting to bind together, and I'm happy with that. You can adjust the water slightly if you need to, but that's what I'm looking for in my dough. Now you're going to need a pudding bowl. These will go in an oven and they'll go in a steamer, and before I put the pastry into here, I'm just going to take a little bit of grease and I'm just going to line the inside of the bowl. And then I'm just taking a small round piece of baking paper, because sometimes these puddings do stick, and I'm just going to pop that in the bottom of the bowl like so. On a lightly floured surface, we're just going to take our pastry and we're just going to roll out a nice circle. Now to get the size of your dough, just measure the inside of your bowl like this, and that is 11 inches. So we want our dough to be approximately 11 inches in diameter. It doesn't need to be cut to a circle because we can trim that up once it's in the bowl. But at this point, we're going to roughly work the center of the pastry, and I'm going to cut out 1/4 of our pastry like so. So we end up with that piece which we're going to keep for our top. Then I just want to take a brush and I'm lightly dampening the surface of our pastry. And then I want to sprinkle the surface with dried thyme. This really is a great herb to go with this pudding. And now we can lift our pastry, and we're putting it thyme side on the inside, just dropping that into the bowl. And you can see now where I cut that corner out, that allows us to sort of shape the pastry and just line the inside of our pudding basin. And look inside the bowl there, we want to join that seam up, so a little bit of water in there and just ease those joints together, because we don't want a gap in the pastry at all. Now I'm just going to use a pair of kitchen scissors and trim off the pastry. I don't want it too short, I want to leave about a good centimetre, half an inch over the edge to pinch the top and the bottom together. So we've got our pudding bowl lined there with the pastry, and now we're taking our steak and ale, and this smells absolutely delicious, and we're just going to spoon that into the pudding, and I'm just pushing that down into the pudding. Now we want it to be about a centimetre, maybe half an inch off the top to allow for expansion and bubbling as it cooks. And using a brush, I want to put water around the edges of our pudding case here. And I've rolled out the second piece of pastry here, big enough to cover the top, and I'm also going to wet around the edges of this pastry. Then I want to lift that over the top of the pudding case, and I want to squeeze and pinch the edge of this pudding together. We want a really good seal on the edge here. And when you're comfortable that that pie edge is all joined together, I'm just going to use a sharp knife, and I'm just going to trim up the edge of this pie. Now we're just going to cover the pie before we cook it. Now I've got a bit of greaseproof paper, and I've just folded a little pleat into that so that it can expand as the pie expands. Now you can fold this over the edge of your pie dish and use some string to tie around, but our pudding dish came with these purpose-made little covers on there, so I'm just going to pop that over the top. Then I'm just going to tie that tight around the top of the pudding dish, and that pudding is now ready for cooking. So if you don't have a pressure cooker, we need a big deep saucepan with some sort of dish in the bottom to keep the pudding dish off of the flame. And then we're just going to add a couple of pints of water into that. And then we're going to pop our pudding dish on top. And we want to continue to fill this with water till it's halfway up the pudding dish. You then bring this up to the boil and then reduce it to a simmer. And this needs to steam with a cover on it for up to 4 hours. So you're looking for a 4-hour cook on a really slow flame. And it's important while it cooks that you check that there's enough water. Don't let it boil dry. It must have water in there at all times. Now, if you have the advantage of having a pressure cooker, it really will cook a lot quicker. Only 2 hours. Same method. We're just going to put a couple of litres, about 4 pints of water into the bottom of our pressure cooker. And then we're just going to lay the pudding on top of the trivet. Now that needs to cook for about 2 hours on a pressure cooker. Now mine is automatic, it's electric, so I can just leave it, come back in 2 hours time, and it's cooked. So there is my steak and ale pudding out of the pressure cooker. Guys, the smell coming off of that is absolutely delicious. It smells wonderful. I'm gonna let it sit for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, let it cool down just a little bit, then I'll use a knife just to ease it out of the bowl. Okay, while my pudding is cooling down, I just want to show you here, these were my beer and nut brownies, guys, and that video will be going up in the next day or so, and all courtesy of this fantastic beer from the Bullant brewery. Now, they're not sponsors or anything, they're just guys that I met, and I'm really stoked with the quality of their beer. I have no idea if this is going to come out beautifully or not. I'm going to turn this over. And let's see, we've either got a beautiful pudding that's going to come out in one piece or a complete disaster. Oh, there you go, guys. Look at that. My beautiful, look at that. I'm really, really pleased. There's a little bit of the gravy coming out the side there. But that is my steak and beer pudding. It's like a pie. The pastry is a lot lighter. So I can tell from the smell of this, it's going to be absolutely delicious. Look, I'll put some photographs up for sure. Thank you very much. This is an absolute treat. Thank you to the Bullant Brewery for that wonderful beer. Guys, join me in the next video. Be good, take care, I'll see you next time. Hopefully I got some photographs up there. That pie, I can tell you, was absolutely delicious. So I'm just doing a little outro now to say thank you again and subscribe to the channel, and please comment down below. The smell in the room today from all these beautiful cooking products is fantastic. I wish you could be here. Take care. See you next time.